Hi, everyone. Kinsey Schofield here with Isabel Webster. You can read her column in Women magazine, View from the Back, where you have the courage to say what everyone is thinking. And today we're going to talk about what everyone is thinking about the Princess of Wales, because I think, are the presidents of her fan club.
Oh my goodness, Kinsey, you know the girl to call when you want to talk about Kate. Honestly, it was such wonderful news to hear her saying that she's in remission finally. We still don't know exactly what the cancer was, of course, but it has been nail biting, hasn't it, for the last year or so? Obviously, there was the crazy furore this time last year. Who can forget? Honestly, when you look back, it was absolutely bonkers, wasn't it? And then obviously she came out and told us, I think it was February or March in the end, that she caved and was forced to tell us that she was having preventative chemo. And then we heard that that finished in September, but we didn't know she was in remission. And then we just heard her saying, in a big thank you to the Marsden Hospital in London, that she is in remission. And it's just, yeah, it's wonderful news for us. Of course, it's fantastic news for her kids and also for William, because I feel like with his dad poorly, with everything that happened with his mum, his estrangement from his brother, I always feel like William's got a bit of a tough gig at the moment. So to know that Kate's on the mend, fingers crossed, because remission isn't the all clear, but
Mhm.
it is a step in the right direction.
Okay, well, what you've said has led me to two different questions.
Okay.
Number one, I want to ask if you think we don't give enough attention to King Charles, because you're right. You just said that about the king, and I'm like, oh, that's right. King Charles still has cancer. And number two, I would ask, had you ever seen anything like the Where is Kate chaos, where the internet bleeds into mainstream media and you feel ridiculous because you are having to repeat people online, and you know that 10 years ago there's no way you would have done that. I mean, same with me. I couldn't believe that.
Yeah, conspiracy theories. Let's start with that second question first, because they are bleeding into the mainstream. We're seeing it everywhere, aren't we? Whether it's in politics, being fed by Elon Musk, but also when it comes to the royal family. And the tragedy in this particular instance is it was such a fiercely personal issue. And we know how private William and Kate have really worked hard to keep their family life, their private life. And they were forced into making this announcement because they wanted to just deal with it as a family, because the world went bonkers. And I really remember a turning point for me was when my husband, who does not work in the media, he doesn't have anything to do with the royal family, came home one day and said, my colleague who's from China was sitting next to me, and she said, guys, I'm just going to have to ask, and the whole office was quizzed by her, why aren't you all talking about the fact that Kate's dead? And he's like, what? And this was everyone in China back home was like, Kate's dead. And then we had Kim Kardashian with a t-shirt saying, where's Kate? We all lost the plot. But as you say, it bled into the mainstream. People who talk about proper news, talk about the royal rota, the events that, the palaces authorize and send us here, there and everywhere. We're suddenly having to talk about all this nonsense. She was just trying to privately deal with something really quite frightening.
Yeah, it's the last time I think I saw it was the 2016 election, where things that were, whispered online became things that everybody had to confront in the real world, and some of it turned out not to be true. I don't know how to put the toothpaste back in the tube. I don't
No.
know. I mean, is control gone?
It's really difficult. And I was thinking about this because do you remember she, as part of her sort of coming out and saying how she was doing, there was a Mother's Day photograph. It was
Mhm.
just before I think it was just before she came out and said what was going on. She issued a Mother's Day photograph, which she had edited. And she'd done photoshopping for years. As any mum will tell you, if you've got more than one child, you've probably got no one perfect picture. So you might merge one where you're smiling or let's face it, was probably Prince Louis pulling a, raspberry or whatever. But she had edited the picture. But because the world has moved on as well in terms of AI, and all the news agencies are super hyper alert to things being fake imagery, she got questioned whether or not that was real, whether or not someone had inserted a photograph of her into this family photograph because she wasn't really there. I mean, completely bonkers stuff that we've never had to verify pictures that have been edited by Kate before. And it's sad, really, because it's probably put her off ever touching up a family photo. We'll probably never get that kind of, homemade family picture again in the
Right.
same way. I think they've definitely had their fingers burnt in the last year when it comes to sort of the way that the world responded to not only their news but that photograph as well. And I think we'll all be, at a loss really. We'll have lost out a little bit of them as a result of us being so bonkers.
You're absolutely right. I was worried about that too. And, I had relatives calling me in Texas going, is she in a coma? No, she's not in a coma. My thing is, common sense is not very common anymore because there's no way they could have done that to us. There's no way the royal family
No.
could have or would have engaged in something. So I want to use the word sinister because you just can't hide a princess from us.
You can't. But you know what, Kinsey? I think what exacerbated it a little bit was the fact that the king had come out and made his announcement and had kind of leveled with us all and told us, I'm dealing with cancer. He wasn't specific about it, but we all knew what was going on. And then Kate just kind of disappeared. And I think from what I remember of that time, they both got their diagnosis at a similar time.
Mm-hmm.
But Kate, obviously, a younger woman, 3 small children, it came as a big shock. I think she was in hospital for 2 weeks. She was in, a serious state for a while. In many ways, it seemed a bit worse than what the king was dealing with. But the fact that he had leveled with us and she hadn't was probably a bit tricky as well in terms of the public and speculation, because people were like, well, why can't, if it is cancer, why can't she just tell us? Because the king has.
Right.
But it goes back to your question, do you think we don't give him enough attention in all of this? And you know what? I almost like that we don't. I really admire, he's of that generation that, well, not the same generation of his mum, but she raised him very much to be, keep calm and carry on. And that's not to say that Kate hasn't done the same, but he is very much, I don't worry about him. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
In the sense that you feel like he's got it under control, and he's going to get on with it, and he'll be honest with us. I worry a bit more about Kate, and I feel, perhaps everyone's a bit more touchy about how she's doing.
Yes, and it's because I think what you mentioned about Prince William, you imagine him being so worried about his children experiencing something similar. And we love, the entire family, seeing them as a unit. It gives us confidence in the future because they are just so sweet and united and well put together. It's a bland way of putting it, but they just seem like strength, I guess.
Oh my goodness, they're the perfect family. I mean, if Ralph Lauren did like a photo shoot, that's them, isn't it? They're just so picture perfect, but it seems authentic. They seem to, the siblings seem to get on really well. I love seeing footage of Charlotte sort of bossing both the boys around. George always looks a little bit pensive and like he's got the weight of the world on his shoulders. But isn't that sweet that you get the sense that actually the heir to he's the third in line, isn't he? Or how do you phrase it? He's not the next one, the one up. So second in line, he's got the weight of the world on his shoulders, and good that he's taking that seriously, even though he is only little. Charlotte's kind of the mummy of the gang, and then you've got Louis having a ball.
Yes.
Isn't that just so great? I mean, they are so entertaining. They seem like a lovely family, and I think it's sort of modelled a bit on the Middleton sort of family dynamic, isn't it? The trio. And I do think their whole family model is, in terms of mum and dad as well, Kate and Will's, is modelled on the Middleton parents, who, as we saw in their video that they sort of gave us a behind the scenes last year when they were all around the Middletons table playing some fiercely competitive game. That's a really lovely tight unit, which William's been open about really wanting to model something that frankly he didn't get. Obviously there was the divorce, but things were a bit more formal back then, and family, and they've worked really hard to move away from that and create a bit more normality. So they do seem like a really happy, tight little unit. So long may that continue, because wouldn't wish that on anyone, to have that hanging over you, that worry about the future. But it could happen to anyone.
It could, and that's what Catherine says. Like, cherish every day. You never know what's around the corner, and it can happen to anyone. But just your definition of Louis, it is nice that Louis has so much personality, because I do miss that from Prince Harry. So he's kind of taken over that silly. We don't know what he's going to do next, but we know we're going to laugh and love it. Let's talk a little bit about, because when you and I talk about Catherine, a lot of the times we like to discuss what she's wearing, especially the fact that we can run out and grab it typically at that moment. Does it surprise you at all that the palace has decided, and Catherine, that she wants to focus on work over wardrobe. Will that hinder the economy in any way when it comes to fashion? I've seen people complain saying, oh, well, she does so much for the economy. Or is this really just about wanting to be taken seriously because she has a new lease on life?
You know what? I think there's lots to this. And I don't think it's necessarily about her work, because I think she's been really serious about her early years stuff for a long time.
Mhm.
I think perhaps the cancer furore, everything we've already sort of covered with sort of increased scrutiny and speculation, has kind of put more pressure than ever on her appearance. I
Mm.
think every single time we see her, we're analyzing, does she look well? Does she look older? Is she okay? Is she going to make it's too much. I mean, people used to speculate perhaps she was a bit too skinny. I mean, she's naturally a slim woman, and she could wear anything and look gorgeous. But I suspect that part of this is about saying, I just want you all to back off a little bit on how I look, because there's more to me than that. And I think that's probably been sped up by, as I say, this cancer thing. And I look back to when she was standing outside the cenotaph in November,
Mm.
and all the papers had, really unflattering pictures of her the next day. There was loads of noise online about how she wasn't looking her best. It was horrid. So
Yes.
I think it's just about, give her a bit of credit for what she's doing, because I think, to be fair, we've got a huge appetite for that. I think people really love that she leans into something, this early years stuff in particular, but lots of the stuff she does, she's got such good public support behind her. I wonder if it's about that. But let's not forget, the whole reason that she is married to the heir to the throne is because of the clothes she was wearing. She was modeling, wasn't she, in this catwalk? It was because she was a model that she caught his eye. So,
Yeah.
I don't think she'll ever be able to fully escape that. And I actually had a little scan of the papers before I came on to chat to you, Kinsey. And there were at least 3 stories discussing what she was wearing. Is this a nod to the Duchess of Edinburgh because they were wearing the same colour on some event? Or is she thrifty because she's re-wearing a Zara? We're never going to stop writing or taking an interest in her clothing. But I do think possibly there is this sense, guys, just back off my appearance. I'm in my 40s. I've had cancer.
Yeah.
Can we talk about something else? I mean, I
Yeah.
get it.
Yeah, I get that too. It was odd timing because it felt like it happened right after there were the reports that Vogue was going to offer her her own, I believe it was international or global, I can't remember how they worded it, cover, where she could pick her own photographer and determine whether or not she was going to give an interview and style herself if that's what she wanted to do. Do you think we might see her go in that direction? Or do you think, because I hadn't thought about that, that
Mm.
it's really truly the commentary around her appearance, which I've seen, and I went, I had a meltdown over. I was
Yeah.
mad that people were being ugly about it. But I've never thought about that. That really could be why she's saying, look, I want a center here. And the center is my good intentions with the early years. Do you think she might consider the Vogue deal, or do you think she really is going to say, I have much bigger priorities?
I think it would be difficult for her to say, please don't talk about my clothes and what I'm
Yeah.
wearing, and then
Yeah.
do a big sit down with the world's most highly sought after and desirable magazine, Vogue. But that being said, she's done a cover for them before for their 100th anniversary. I think it was 2016. She knows Anna Wintour, who's the English but editor of American Vogue. And, you know, she's never shied away from Vogue in the past, but I just think it's the timing that she's just said, hang on, let's talk about something else. I think she'd probably want to do perhaps a broadsheet newspaper or a global magazine that's a bit more news orientated, perhaps, if she's going to do any sort of sit down interview about things. But I might be wrong. And as you made the point, what she's done over the years for small brands, for British brands, in terms of the fashion industry, which is huge, by the way, in terms of our economy in this country, what we produce in terms of fashion is hugely important to our GDP. And so she'll be aware of that. And, I don't think she'll want to move away fully from that. And if she can showcase some British talent through doing a Vogue cover at some point, maybe she will. So I wouldn't like to call it, but I just think the timing's a bit tricky.
I agree with you. It is difficult. And I thought, oh, how odd that this happens right after that invitation. Are they in some way connected? But I think you're right. It could just be a coincidence. You mentioned the Mother's Day photo that definitely got people talking. And I was so irritated at the time that that happened because they have, or they're supposed to have such a strong team. You want people smarter than you working for
Yeah.
them, typically.
Yeah.
So I was very irritated at the time because I thought, how come someone else didn't catch that? But we did get a new photograph from her on World Cancer Day, taken by Louis. It was not something we've ever seen before. I talked to some, Dickie Arbiter and Hugo Vickers were like, hey, there was something very artistic, very dark about it. It was just so funny listening to them describe baby Louis's photo. What was your reaction to it? Because it was so sweet and unique.
I mean, I love that Louis was behind the camera and taking on a passion of hers, which has always been photography. So that was a very sweet element to it all. But I do think it feeds into what we were discussing earlier. It was from far away, it was grainy. She's not going to touch that up again for us. She's not going to do a little composition because she's had her fingers burnt and she's tired of it. And I do think that there's a reason why she let her child do it, and that was that. I don't know if we'll ever see a Kate Middleton, self taken picture again in the public eye because of the way the world went crazy. I mean, kill notices were put on a Mother's Day photograph from 5 international news agencies. It was frontline news that the news agencies had cancelled her picture. No one was talking about Happy Mother's Day. It was ridiculous and probably really, really upsetting when she was unwell anyway.
Mm-hmm.
But the picture that she's just put out there that you were talking about for World Cancer Day, and she was saying, don't forget to nurture all that lies beyond the disease. And she's surrounded by the trees. And I think there was a secondary message to the fact that she, had Louis taking the picture, which was the role of nature in her life and in healing. And it's something that I think she and the King both probably feel very deeply together. I'm sure both of them have taken every opportunity during their cancer treatments to get out and about in the fresh air, exercise. I mean, I don't know about you, Kinsey, but I always feel better if I've been out in nature. It's something about perspective. It's something about feeling small under the sky. It puts your problems out of your mind for a bit. And it is really healing. And I think it was great. They very often sort of practice what they preach, don't they? They really believe in wildlife conservation, nature, outdoorsiness, and they sell it really well.
That's so funny that you say that because when she was healing, we found out she had cancer. When I was getting word of, because I think I told you when it was happening, I have friends that live in the area. I have friends that their children go to that school, and they were saying to me over the phone, she's picking them up from school. This is crazy. Yeah. And I would try to hint at it without putting her safety in jeopardy, saying you guys are going to feel ridiculous when this is all over and done with. But one of the things that I heard repeatedly when she was going through the healing process and just trying to function through chemo was she's staying outside. She loves being outside. And she loves being outside with the kids. So that's so interesting that you said that. And that's what your takeaway too. Do you mind if we talk about Prince William for
Sure.
There was a really sweet story about Prince William. He was at this bereavement center. It was a child bereavement center, which sadly, it never even occurred to me that something like that had to exist. So it goes to show how important this work is that they do, because I'd never even stopped to think about something as sad and significant about that, but like that. But he was talking about the loss of his mother. And he said, sometimes the hardest thing about grief is finding the words for how you actually feel. It's crucial for those first few years, particularly, that you have support like this. It's got you in your practice how to help yourself. How just devastating that he has to revisit those moments when he is doing something as important as reminding us that places like this exist. I just feel like I've seen a much more selfless side of him over the last few years.
Yeah, and he, a bit like Prince George, does look sometimes like he's got the weight of the world on his shoulders, doesn't he? I don't know whether you think. I mean, when he was at a lot of engagements with Kate and indeed with Harry, the three of them, sort of pre-Meghan, were always goofballs, always larking about, playing some sort of sport together. And yes, they've grown up. Yes, they've moved away from each other in terms of the brothers. And obviously we've seen a lot of William solo in the last year, and indeed even cancelling things, which is just frankly unheard of. And we understand, of course, why. But yeah, every time he talks about his own mental health, you can see it's painful, and I really admire him for really talking about it, because I don't know about you, Kinsey, but whenever I think about Princess Diana and the nature of her death, I just think about Prince William walking behind her coffin, just 15 years old, and Harry so little. He was not even this big tall boy that we all know and love, or 12 years old at that point, and all rosy cheeked. And no child should ever have to grieve their mother, who they'd lost in a traumatic way, in front of the world like that, and then probably in a very British aristocratic boarding school kind of environment, never really deal with those feelings, probably for many, many, many years. So, yes, silver spoon in his mouth, everything in the world in terms of wealth and privilege, but lots of personal trauma, and they're human at the end of the day. And I always feel moved whenever I think about Prince William and Harry and what they've been through. And I'm sure they've been a huge comfort to all those children and now adults going through life that they have been brave enough to talk about their own experiences with, because what incredible role models that they've been as men as well, because we know, again, men are not good about talking about their feelings. We know what that means in terms of suicide rates in young men. It's a huge issue. I actually sometimes think Harry probably hasn't dealt with it either yet fully. I think Williams seems to have come through it very much through the grounding again of the Middleton family and having his family. I feel like Harry still looks a little lost.
Yeah.
He's obviously lost his entire extended family, immediate family, in terms of father and brother and nieces and nephews and cousins and all of that. But also Meghan's family's so tiny. She's literally her mum.
Right.
And his network is tiny, and I'm sure that's hard for him. I know there's not a lot of sympathy out there, but I'm probably team sympathy for Harry, even if he is, his own worst enemy sometimes.
Well, there's this new book by Tom Quinn that's coming out, and it's from the courtiers' perspectives. He's interviewed a lot of people that worked with Harry and Meghan, and I found this really interesting, and I believe it. According to the book, Prince Harry never considered himself the spare until Meghan showed up and realized how much priority Prince William was given, and how she didn't understand why Prince William and Catherine lived in Kensington Palace and they were in Frogmore Cottage. So
well, it started with Nottingham Cottage. Sorry to interrupt. Was it Little Nottingham Cottage that they had, which was right next to Kensington Palace? And I remember hearing that Meghan was furious about this tiny little cottage. Literally the very confronting reality of this huge grand palace. And then she probably had a bigger sort of studio apartment when she was a student.
Yeah.
No, I'm sure that's true. I think you're probably right.
But apparently, he fell into victim mode because somebody was there going, why don't we have this? Why don't we have that? And that's hard, because I've been around that too. Or, God love our mothers, but sometimes our mothers are like, well, why does she get that? Why is she the lead in the play? And you're like, is she the lead in the play?
Oh, I know, goodness. But do you know what? Funny you should mention the role of mums in all of this. I also think that no one ever really says this, because obviously Diana died too young, and she was so loved and adored and so wonderful with ordinary people. But she was a handful.
Yeah.
And she was complicated and emotional. And, I'm sure behind closed doors, the Queen and, to be fair, Prince Charles were losing the will to live because she was a handful. And I think Harry is probably very much like his mum, in a way that no one really acknowledges. The stuff where he's very emotional, a little bit all over the place is Diana, isn't it?
Yeah. Yes.
And I love Diana.
Yeah, I do too. I do too.
Yeah.
I say that too. Vengeance. Vengeance. We saw a lot of vengeance from Harry and Meghan after Megxit. However, I honestly think that's what we were seeing from Princess Diana when she died, because she was trying to make Dr. Khan jealous. So she was running off with Dodi, and he was calling her the night she died to tell her to come home. It was all just, she was upset that I believe Charles was throwing Camilla a 50th birthday party,
Yeah.
and she thought she was going to marry Dr. Khan, and he wasn't committed to the fame. So vengeance is something we saw too. Well, it's been so much fun to talk to you. Can you tell me before you let me go about your column? How can we find it? How can we read it? You talk about so many fascinating topics on it.
It's great. Oh, well, thank you. It's called View from the Back, and it's you can probably find it through my socials is the easiest way, through Instagram or Twitter. It's in Woman Mag. I've actually written the cover story for them as well this week, which has been about skinny jabs and the rise of them.
Oh gosh, I cannot wait to read that. It's a big birthday for me this year, and I'm contemplating.
Is it a big birthday? What, 30?
40.
Oh, well, I'm the other side of 40, nothing to fear. 40s are there.
Okay, good, great.
But yeah, so there's lots of topics up there, and I touch on the royals from time to time as well. So thank you. If people want to check it out, that'd be great.
Yeah, so definitely follow Isabel on social media, because I love looking at your world. You are basically my Disney princess. Just looking at your life, the way you're home.
Oh, bless
It's so
you.
much fun to follow you there. But thank you so much for talking to me today. You know I love you.
Oh, well, likewise, Kinsey. Your podcast is fabulous. Thank you very much for having me on it. I feel honored.
Oh my goodness. Well, I hope you'll come back again, especially when we get some new Catherine, Princess of Wales news.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Anytime.
Thank you. Talk to you again
Thank
soon.
you.
Bye.